Hey, welcome to my world / Dominique Does Life, and I'm going to be doing a regular series of episodes that are going to focus on recaps and reviews of the most popular TV shows out there and some movies as well. I'll be doing some videos, I'll be doing some podcasts, I'll be doing a little bit of everything and just kind of sticking to my schedule and doing what I'm able to do and when I'm able to do it. One of these things is going to be The Walking Dead. One of these topics that I'm going to focus on and one of these shows I'm going to be reviewing is certainly going to be The Walking Dead. It's one of the most popular shows out there on TV. So, of course, I'm going to focus on The Walking Dead. I like to start doing Game of Thrones regularly as well when that comes back, hopefully in 2018. So there's a little bit of something to look forward to for you. The show, I mean, not necessarily my recaps, although I'm sure I will do the best job I'm able to do. So let's talk a little bit. Oh, before we start, ahoy mateys, there be spoilers ahead. So please keep that in mind and don't listen any further if you've not already watched the latest episode of The Walking Dead on AMC, The Damned. Again, there are spoilers ahead. Turn this podcast off right now if you have not yet seen the latest episode of The Walking Dead, The Damned, which aired last night, Sunday, October 29th, 2017. Spoilers. Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, let's discuss the episode. I'm not going to recap every single point of this incredible ensemble show for that reason, because it is an ensemble show. I'm not going to go through every point and every bit of character development in every line. I do tend to give a really thorough review and a really thorough recap of all of the shows that I recap and review on www.SueBoozeCorner.com. However, my good buddy JJ Gatlin is the one that does The Walking Dead for Sue Boo's Corner. I have been covering several other shows for Sue Boo's Corner, and that's where you're going to get the really detailed stuff from me. Here we're just going to kind of recap it, review it, and give you an overview of what I think is going on and what I think is to come. And I'd love to hear your theories on what things you feel are going to come in future. I want to hear your Walking Dead theories. Don't worry if they sound crazy. Crazy is totally okay here. So let's talk about what happened. So clearly, the season 8 opener went ahead and set up the war for us. It set up sort of the opening salvo to the first battle in this, what looks to be an extended war. Now, we talked last week about how some of the actions that Rick, Maggie, and team took in regard to how they handled things with Negan specifically were a touch on the problematic side. Okay, and folks, I still believe that to be true. I do think that, a major plot hole was why didn't Rick or Maggie or Eric or anybody else who was standing there looking directly at Negan, okay, why didn't any of them shoot him? Why? Right? Why didn't any of them shoot him? He was right there in front of them. So that's definitely a major plot hole that maybe they will explain later, but I suspect they won't. Obviously, that would kind of kill off any excitement on the fans' part as far as what's going to come next in that season. And ever since Buffy the Vampire Slayer aired in 1997, there has pretty much had to be like a big baddie, a big bad on every season of every TV show, which is really cool to know that there's a different big bad every season. And the plot's going to build up toward defeating or confronting that big bad, right? So Negan is clearly the big bad. he was the big bad last season. He's the big bad this season. And so obviously they can't just take him out in the opening episode of season 8. But they did have the chance to do that. And so because they didn't, and because they went about things in the way that they did, kind of leading the undead, the walking dead, toward the compound that the Saviors were in, and because they went ahead and just surrounded it and were tactical but didn't take that opportunity for a surgical strike against Negan, the events of last night's episode were allowed to unfold. And again, I'm sure this is just one of those situations where you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit, but I do happen to think that it's a little bit lazy, and it may well have something to do with time constraints, with, deadlines for the writers, what have you, and obviously you can't expect every show to be perfect in its continuity. There are going to be continuity and mythology flaws now and again, but this was kind of a biggie for me. So since that didn't happen, and since Gregory, the leader of the Hilltop, for those of you who don't know everybody by name, went ahead and escaped, and Gabriel was kept with the Saviors, we have the events that took place today. I don't think that Rick and Maggie are yet aware that Gabriel is with the Saviors right now. I'm not sure that they're aware of Gregory's whereabouts, or that he's kind of on the loose, kind of bouncing around out there unchecked and unmonitored. But he is, and I'm sure that this will come back to bite them at some point. Now, what we saw with regard to the battle in this last episode, The Damned, we saw some interesting character developments. We saw Morgan go in as part of a tactical squad that was securing the compound and taking the compound from the Saviors. And, of course, as we know, throw a little backstory at you here for those of you who maybe don't remember exactly what his backstory is, because there are so many characters. Morgan Jones obviously lost his son, shortly after the apocalypse began. That drove him over the edge. He sort of lost his sanity at that point and regained it only after coming upon a kindly man who believed in extreme pacifism. And he adopted that man's fighting style. He adopted his fighting style with a bow. Not a bow and arrow, a bow, B-O, like bow and Ken and nunchucks. So he uses his bow, his staff, and he, up until this point, really has been very hesitant to kill anybody. But it almost seems as if he's just adapted somebody else's philosophy, somebody else's ideology, to sort of save him the trouble of being like completely insane and without a rudder and just, floating out there alone. And I figured after we saw that episode with the Morgan backstory in the last season or so, I figured that, his ideology would be challenged, because it's not really his, is it? It's not his. It's the man who befriended him's ideology. It's not his ideology. So he's kind of got to find himself again. He's putting himself back together. He's got to find himself. Now, for those of you who watched the episode, and I hope that at this point that is all of you, this past Sunday, you will notice that Morgan, when his people were threatened and when some of the people around him, the red shirts we'll call them, were killed in the retaking, or the taking, in fact, of the compound, he snapped and kind of said, forget this, and just went on a rampage, just shooting everybody that he saw point blank. Boom, taking him out, one shot, move on. And you could just see that anger in his eyes. A switch flipped. Something triggered that. And I'm sure that it was the loss of his companions and the, callousness and coldness with which the Savior's dispatch of people left, right, and center. So something sort of, a switch sort of flipped in Morgan Jones's head, and he sort of went on this rampage. Now, I think we're going to have to follow him on a character journey, on a character arc, wherein he kind of bounces back and forth between extreme violence and extreme pacifism in order to find himself. And I suspect that, quote unquote, finding himself will include him sort of landing somewhere in the middle between those two very polar opposite philosophical states of being and states of mind. So I think it'll be interesting to follow Morgan on his journey, and I do think that he will end up somewhere in the middle, okay? Now, Tara is having a similar struggle. Obviously, she's still reeling from the loss of her girlfriend, Denise, and she is experiencing a similar struggle. Hey, these people are brutal. Why give them any benefit? Let's take them all out. So both she and Morgan have some trouble when they round up with Jesus. They round up a bunch of saviors. Now, the first time they did this, they met a man who claimed to be being held captive by the saviors. In this past episode, he claimed his name was Dean. Obviously, he was lying about that. He was one of the major players in Negan's sort of army. And they kind of got stabbed in the back for helping him. Tara and Jesus got stabbed in the back for trying to help him. And of course, after that incident, Tara was even more of the mindset that, hey, let's take these guys out. Let's not give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's just handle business. It's black and white. Well, when Morgan met up with them later on, he and Tara were kind of a force to be reckoned with. And you can definitely see their point of let's not let these guys get any leverage on us. Let's not be foolish. Let's not be stupid here. But yet you could also see that point of view that Jesus holds. And interesting that his nickname is Jesus, because he was behaving quite a bit like Jesus. Where Jesus is basically saying, hey, we have to give these people the benefit of the doubt. If we don't, we lose a piece of ourselves. We are at risk of losing something much bigger than this war when we simply take people out and don't give it any second thought. And of course, that is a great point, and it's very true. In this situation, however, I think the thing to remember is that these folks are highly, highly indoctrinated. They are all suffering, if you will, from Stockholm syndrome of some kind, and they all feel very beholden to Negan. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out and whether that Stockholm syndrome sort of dissipates as they're spared and shown mercy, or whether they're part of a greater plan to take back the compound, to infiltrate Alexandria, and to take things over for Negan, right? Because remember the philosophy, folks, of the saviors. That is, I am Negan. Everybody's Negan. Negan's eyes and ears are everywhere. Every single character on that show that is a savior in some way represents an aspect of Negan. And it's put very simply and very plainly to the audience when they say, I am Negan, right? So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. If that Stockholm syndrome dissipates, or if it intensifies now that the Alexandrians and the Hilltop people, Maggie's group, have shown them leniency and shown them mercy. At least some of the saviors. They've shown some of the saviors mercy because they threw their guns down. So, unfortunately, the saviors that were still at the compound during the heat of the main battle really gave the Alexandrians absolutely no choice but to take them all out. Now, there is a point in time where a couple of the characters kind of suggest that they start to fall back. They say, hey, like, whoa, we don't want to get the Alexandrians killed. If these saviors are going to go so hard on us, I think we should all kind of just step back. I think we should all fall back a little bit, regroup. Well, that didn't sit too well with Eric. And unfortunately, he ran off to kind of have the back of various other Alexandrians and Hilltop folks who were trying to continue fighting this battle against some of the really hardcore saviors outside, where the Walking Dead were roaming around right outside the compound. Okay, so Eric runs off to ostensibly have the backs and cover some of these other characters because he doesn't want the Alexandrians and the Hilltop folks sacrificing their lives when he could have done something. Now, of course, he gets shot in the process. Now, he doesn't die in this particular episode, but he is what appears to be gravely wounded. He appears to be gravely wounded. He was gut shot. We don't know if the bullet went straight through. We don't really know what the prognosis is, but he wasn't looking too good as the episode kind of closed out. Okay, so just something to keep in mind, that this is one of the folks who could very well die, and to be a touch on the problematic side with regard to this Eric situation. Okay. Walking Dead already has a little bit of a problem with killing their people of color and gay people. Denise, Bob, T-Dog, so many others. So many others. Sasha. Now, of course, I'm not saying rather that these folks like Sasha and Tyrese and, all of these people who have died, who are people of color or LGBT folks, that they should be kept alive only because of that. But I do think it's problematic when TV shows follow that sort of bury your gays, bury your black people, bury your people of color trope. I think that's very problematic. That's very outdated, and it's a poor example to follow. So I hope that that's not where The Walking Dead is going yet again. They already wasted Denise. Now they're going to possibly waste yet another gay person? Really? Eric? Okay. All right. If that's where they're going to go with it. Now, again, I'm not saying that these people should be kept alive just because they shouldn't be killed off because they're gay or they're people of color. No, not saying that at all. But this is a problematic trope. And I hope that the sort of backlash to Denise's death kind of helped the writers and the showrunners to understand that maybe this was a time during which they should proceed with caution. So I am hoping that the foreshadowing of Eric's potential death is just to distract from who's actually going to die. Let's hope for that. Of course, all the characters are beloved characters. We don't want any of them to die. I don't think there's any possibility that like a Daryl or, again, a Rick or a Maggie is going to die. But I think there are some strong potentials with the characters who I just named. So as far as the war itself, interestingly enough, now folks, do you remember Morales? You know Morales from back in, I think he left in like the beginning of season 2 or something like that with his family. Obviously, if you've watched the show, this past Sunday, you saw Morales. He was in the Saviors compound and seemed to be one of Negan's top lieutenants. He confronts Rick, gun in hand, and he has called Negan and told him to, get the Saviors together, re-up, and come at the Alexandrians and the Hilltop folks. So this could be a real problem. He tells Rick point blank, I have called them back and they are coming to basically come back and retake the compound. So Rick is, of course, wondering what the heck is going on, because last they talked, he and Morales were friends. Unfortunately, it looks like Morales has gone through quite a few changes since that time. His family does not appear to have survived. I believe they headed for a city of some sort, like Houston or something like that, and just kind of rode off into the sunset. Clearly, it did not end well. And Morales is back, and he is worse than ever. He is back, and he is gunning for Rick for whatever reason. Now, we don't know why this is, if it's just because he's a savior and he is Negan. We don't know. But we do know that he's for real. And the episode kind of closes out with him holding a gun on Rick, having called Negan back with the saviors. So it'll be interesting to see if Rick is able to reconnect with Morales and to get him to see reason and to kind of come back to reality. It'll be very interesting to see if that's possible. I'm not sure whether it is, but it sure would be good to kind of see some of the gang getting back together. There have been so many changes since season 1 where Morales first appeared. And it would sure be nice to see a few more of those characters come back and have a bit of a reunion. For those of you who can't remember offhand, I believe the only staples from the first season, because Maggie came in the second season, now are Morales, obviously, Rick, Morgan, Daryl, and Carol. Now, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe these are the only sort of staple members of the group that, have been in the show all the way since season 1. So, and of course, Carl. Judith hasn't even been in the show since season 1 because Mom just conceived her during season 1 and found out about the pregnancy in season 2. And of course, she's now dead. So there are a scant few folks who are still around that were around in season 1. So it would be very nice to have one of those characters in Morales reappear. Now, this is where the episode ended. And of course, Carol also made a very important decision. Carol and Morgan and Tara are kind of struggling with the same or similar issues, sort of mentally and ideologically. Am I part of a group? Am I a loner? Am I a killer? Am I a pacifist? And I really think that they're all going to end up falling somewhere in between after kind of bouncing back and forth between those two extremes for a while. And probably interacting with each other as they do, as they bounce back and forth between those two extremes, trying to find themselves and rediscover themselves again. Now, Carol clearly makes the decision to follow King Ezekiel into battle, knowing that he really isn't, obviously, this King Ezekiel character that he plays, that he's an actor. He's been honest with her about that. And knowing that his confidence and his bravado are for his people, and that although he does inspire confidence, they are far from sure that they are going to win this portion of the war or this battle. So I think Carol makes an important decision for herself in saying, you know what, I'm going to kind of nut up and follow King Ezekiel and do the right thing and be selfless. So I think these character journeys are very interesting. And I think these are the things that are going to keep us hooked, despite some of the odd sort of plot holes and story holes that we've already experienced thus far in the short amount of time that we have had with season 8. Folks, I'm going to wrap it up now. I think that about covers it. Again, I'm not going to get into everybody's personal journey, and, we'd be here for 8.5 years. And like I've said before, unfortunately, I just don't have that kind of time on this podcast. I'd probably have to pay a lot of money for that. So we're going to leave it at that. Please feel free to share your thoughts or feelings. your conspiracy theories, your feelings about where the show is going, your theories about how the plot's going to develop, how characters are going to develop, how they're going to interact with one another, and where the showrunners are going to ultimately take the show in season 8 and beyond. Please feel free to share. And if you are listening on YouTube, remember to click like and subscribe. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful evening and be well.